Welcome to section 1.2. Note we are not covering objectives 4 and 5. Okay, so the first question we have is, what is a formula? Take a second and think about, what is a formula? Well, it's a way to describe the relationship between items in an object. So a way to describe a relationship. Very simple way of describing it. There are other definitions, but this is a very simple, straightforward way. So let's think of an example. Well, if you're looking at, let's say, a rectangle, and you want to know or talk about the perimeter of a rectangle, but you want to be super generic, right? Super generically, you could say the perimeter, letting P be the perimeter, would equal, well, the perimeter is just when you add up all of the sides, right? So it could be, let's just say, 2 of the lengths plus 2 of the widths. It's a super generic way of describing the perimeter for any rectangle. And notice there are multiple variables when we're talking about a formula. We have 1, 2, 3 variables. So formulas usually have a bunch of different variables. Another thing to note about formulas is what it's solved for. So at the moment, this formula is solved for P, because P is by itself. If I was able to rewrite this formula to get L by itself, then I would say the formula is solved for L. Okay, but at the moment it's solved for P. So let's take a look at some examples working with formulas. Example 1. Solve the following formulas for the specified item. So we're given I equals PRT for P. One thing to note here, I know some students like to write in all capitals and so on. Be very careful with math though, because if you're given a capital I, and then a lowercase p, a lowercase r, and a lowercase t, and you try to write the equation with all capitals in the next line, these are not considered the same thing. If you're given a lowercase t, continue to use a lowercase t. Same as if you're given a lowercase r. Or, if you're given a capital R, keep using the capital. Do not switch caps and lowercases. That is something that points will be deducted on an exam. So bear that in mind. Whatever variable you're given, please stick with that. Okay, so we have I equals PRT, and we want to solve for P. Well, first off, where is P in the equation? It's right here. And it's being multiplied by R and T. They're all being multiplied together. So how would I get P by itself if it's being multiplied to by R and T? Well, simple. We can just divide away the R and the T. When I do that, the R cancels and the T cancels, and I'm left with P by itself. So P equals I divided by RT, and we're done. We've solved for P. Alright, one thing I think I may not have mentioned it before, I do live in the country, so there might be a lot of rooster sounds and everything in the backgrounds of my videos. Sorry about that, but it does exist in the country. Alright, so part B, solve P equals 2L plus 2W for W. As usual, always feel free to pause these videos and try solve by yourself. Okay, so in this equation, I'm trying to solve for W. So W is right here. And I always like to ask myself, what's keeping W from being by itself? Well, it's being added to by a 2L, and it's being multiplied by a 2. So there's two things I need to undo. As always, get rid of the addition or subtraction first. So minus the 2L from both sides. And then the last thing to do is to get rid of that 2 that's multiplied to the W. So to undo multiplication, remember, opposite of multiplication is division. Divide both sides by that 2. We'll go ahead, use our arrow to show where we're going. And we have that W equals P minus 2L divided by 2. And there we go. We have solved for W. Let's take a look at C. Solve P equals MNL plus 2L for L. Okay, let's see. Where is L? Right there. Oh, and there. It shows up twice. Interesting. How can we get it by itself if it shows up twice? I like to use a scripted L for the lowercase. Okay. Usually this is where I would ask for any ideas in class. So it shows up twice. Well, you know what we can do? We can use the opposite of distribution, which is factoring. Because there's an L in both of these terms, I can go ahead and factor out that L, which means it'll only appear once, which is what I want. So I factor out the L, and then what's left over is the MN plus the 2. And look, L's by itself. Awesome. It's by itself, and it's being multiplied by this value here. So to undo that multiplication, we'll go ahead and divide it out. That cancels on that side. You have to divide the other side. Remember, properties of equations. And we have L equals P divided by Mn plus 2. And don't worry, if you still had it rewritten as P divided by Mn plus 2 equals L, these two are the exact same thing because they're both still equal. I just usually like to have my solved variable on the left-hand side. You do not need to do that. If you had it like this, that would perfectly fine, and this is perfectly fine as well. Okay, hopefully not too bad. As usual, always email me or come to office hours if you need help. Example 3. If Keikoa wakes up early, it only takes him a half hour to drive the 21 miles from his house in Wahiawa to Honolulu for work. What is his average driving rate in miles per hour? Okay, well, because this problem is starting to talk about miles per hour, there's a formula that always pops into my head, and if it doesn't pop into your head right now, that's okay. I'll give you the formula. The formula is distance equals rate times time. So distance is the D, R is rate, T is time. Okay, whenever you see a motion problem, this equation should almost always pop into your head. If it doesn't yet, keep working at it, it will pop into your head. Alright, so I'm going to use this formula. Let's see, what am I given though in this problem? I am told it takes him a half hour, so half hour and 21 miles. So I'm given half hour is time, right? And I'm told the distance, and what do I want to find? I want to find his average driving rate, or another way to say that is rate. So we want Keikoa's rate. Okay, we can definitely use our formula because we have the distance and we have the time, which means we can solve for rate. So let's go ahead and write down our formula. At the moment, though, this formula is solved for distance, right? I don't want the distance, though. I want Keikoa's rate. So I want R. How do I get R by itself? Well, I can go ahead and divide both sides by T. And then I'll get that distance divided by time equals the rate. Awesome, so now I can go ahead and plug in my time and my distance. And careful, for this formula, time is always in terms of hours. If you're ever given minutes in a problem, you'll need to translate that to hours. Keep that in mind. Thankfully, we are given hours, so half, I'm going to go ahead and change that to 0.5. Let's plug that in. So time is 0.5, and distance is 21. So 21 divided by 0.5 equals R. Go ahead and move that up there, which means that R is going to equal 42. Okay, ooh, this is a word problem. We can't just answer by boxing our little solution there. We actually need to write out our answer in a sentence. So that's one thing to note. This entire course, if you're given a word problem, you need to answer in word form. So how would we answer? There are different ways to answer, but basically, just write out a nice complete sentence in answer to the last question. So we would say, Keikoa, average driving rate is 42. I'm almost there. I'm missing something. I'm missing the units. 42 what's? Well, 42 dogs? Sodas? What is it? 42 miles per hour. Okay. And there we go. Boxing our answer. Alright, so moving on. If we want to solve a percentage problem. So if you're given a partial amount, and we'll call that A, and a whole amount, B, oops, let me fix that, it should be a B, then the following equation can be used to solve a percentage problem. We'll do the partial amount, A, divide that by B, and we'll get the decimal value, which you can translate to percent if you need to. Example 4. If a savings account earns 2.5% interest on a balance of $750 or $7,500 for 1 year, how much interest is earned? Alright, so let's go ahead and set up an equation. First we need to determine what are we given. Well, we're told the interest, and then we're told there's a balance. So we want to figure out how much interest is earned. So out of the 7,500, we want to know how much we get. Well, we can go ahead and create an equation for that, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce a variable since I wasn't given one. If you ever introduce a variable in an equation, you need to write something called a let statement. This lets your readers know what the variable stands for. So I'm going to say let A equal amount of interest earned. Okay, so I know that the amount of interest earned divided by the total amount, which, what is the total amount? Well, that is the 7,500. Should equal the decimal value, which is 25.5%. However, we have to be careful. 25.5% can't be used in my equation. I need to turn that into a full decimal or a fraction. So 25%, if I rewrote that as a fraction, that would be 25 over 100. Sorry, 2.5. Should have been saying 2.5. So we'll let that equal the decimal value, so that should be equal to 2.5 over 100. And there we have our equation. So I have my let statement and my equation. Next thing I'm going to do is solve, and finally I'll write my sentence for my answer. Okay, how do I solve this? Well, A is being divided by that 7,500. So how do I undo division? To undo it, we'll multiply. So go ahead and multiply both sides by the 7,500. I'll put that over 1. And then those guys cancel each other out, and we're left with A by itself. Awesome. Then we get 2.5 over 100 times the 7,500 over 1. And multiplying that out with your calculator, you should end up with 187.5. So I need to write my answer as a sentence, and it's talking about how much interest is earned. So we'll say that, let's see, the amount of interest earned is 187.5, but careful, I gotta do my units. So I can do dollars, but in order to make this actually look like money notation, I have to add that 0 to the end, because we always go to the 100th. And there we go, my period at the end and my capital letter in the beginning. Please note, we are in college, so I know you guys can all write a capital, or you can all write a sentence with a capital letter and a period at the end. Okay, so make sure it's a nice, full, complete sentence, just like something a boss would want to see, or something like that. Alright, that is it for this section. Please email me if you have any questions or come to my Wednesday office hours.